freedom so profound it had to be treated as the ultimate sin. The question was never just what they were hiding, it was why. And now you have the answer. An answer so terrifying and so simple, it chills you to the bone. They were hiding the key to the cage. And you realize, with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty, that the codex, the symbols, the hidden maps, they weren't just a vault for storing this knowledge. They were a distribution network. There is the blacksmith, demonstrating a new type of water screw. A design, he says, came from a brother in Lombardy. And there is a friar, his face pale in the gloom, translating a page from a forbidden text, the Gleba Doctrina, its astronomical charts defying the Church's perfect, unmoving heavens. This is their cathedral. The metallic clink of a moving gear part, the rustle of a hidden manuscript, the low murmur of shared heresy. This is their choir. This is where every act of defiance you've ever heard of finds its source. They are the invisible glue. At first, they looked like religious symbols, strange mandalas. But the lead researcher, a woman with dust on her soul, saw something else. She saw patterns. She saw constellations. And the chill you feel has nothing to do with the room's temperature. It's the icy touch of an impossible truth. What you are looking at is a star chart. Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, they are all there. But they are mapped with a knowledge of celestial mechanics, of parallax and precession that wasn't supposed to exist for another 400 years. This isn't astrology, this is astronomy. They're unearthing evidence of battlefield triage stations, of logistical supply lines, of formations that held against cavalry charges. They want you to picture a screaming mob. The bones tell a different story. The bones whisper of strategy, of discipline, of soldiers. These weren't just peasants. They were an army, and they were winning. They took fortifications, captured armories, and for a few terrifying, glorious weeks, they held London itself. So what happened? Why did the story change? You walk toward the river that borders the field, the place where the final unrecorded battle took place. It's a small, cryptic symbol, a spiraling serpent eating its own tail, drawn with a heavier, more urgent stroke of the pen. You've seen this mark before. It was carved into the stone lintel above the apothecary's forbidden cellar. It was tattooed on the wrist of the heretic they burned in the town square last spring. This isn't a record of a transaction. It's a warning, a mark of a secret society operating within the holy walls themselves. As you trace its chilling shape, a sudden gust of wind from the high, narrow window slams the heavy oak door shut. But it had another, more powerful use, a secret, passed from mother to daughter in hushed tones. It was a potent abortifacient. In a world where a woman's body was a vessel for the church and the state, a tool for producing heirs and laborers, this humble weed was an act of rebellion. It offered a choice. It offered control. It gave a woman sovereignty over the one thing she was supposed to own, her own body. This was a direct threat to the church's dominion over family, over population, over the very structure of power. It will burn, torture, and erase any truth that threatens its existence. The Serpent Gear Society wasn't hiding a secret from the peasants they sought to empower. They were hiding it from the masters who would kill to keep it buried. This is the truth that shatters every assumption you've ever had about the Dark Ages. It wasn't dark because of ignorance. It was kept dark on purpose. You stare at the diagrams, The layering of charcoal, the fermentation of waste, the cycles of burning and burying. So simple, so elegant. You follow a whisper, a glance from a blacksmith whose hands are too clever for just shoeing horses. It leads you to a crumbling, deconsecrated chapel at the edge of the woods, a place where the floor is damp earth and the only God is silence. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of tallow smoke and damp stone. A dozen figures are gathered. They're not what you expect. There's Elspeth, the midwife, who the priest calls a witch. She is unrolling a detailed drawing of human anatomy that would see her burned. The cellar's damp chill from the monastery has been replaced by the low hum of climate control. But the cold you feel seeps from the vellum itself. The gleba doctrina, the doctrine of the earth, lies open. Its ink, a faded sepia, looks like dried blood on pale skin. The Latin is crude, the script of a peasant who learned to write in secret, scrawling forbidden thoughts by the light of a stolen tallow candle. But what he wrote is sending a tremor through the foundations of history, because amidst the clumsy script there are drawings, intricate, impossibly precise drawings. You can almost feel it, a phantom vibration in the soles of your feet, the rhythmic, terrible thunder of 10,000 men marching in unison, their footsteps shaking the very bedrock of England. This wasn't a riot. This was a war. What 99% of people will never know is that archaeology is now proving this forbidden truth. In digs just like this, across England and France, they aren't just finding pitchforks. They're finding mass-produced spearheads. They're finding remnants of boiled leather armor, cuirasses hardened to turn a glancing sword blow. They build an empire while convincing you it's for your own salvation. You keep turning the pages, a strange sickness growing in your gut. A name appears again and again. A wool merchant named Thomas. His transactions growing larger, more complex. It looks like money laundering, centuries before the term existed. Wealth from illicit trades being funneled through the monastery, sanctified with the stamp of the cross. But the last entry next to his name is different. It's not a number. They were the pharmacists of the common folk, and their knowledge was a profound threat. The church, in all its stone and gilded glory, could not patent a wild herb. It couldn't control a poultice made from common weeds. So, in an act of breathtaking spiritual theft, it demonized the women who prescribed them. The woman beside you crushes a leaf of the mugwort between her calloused fingers, and the scent intensifies. She tells you its secrets in a voice barely louder than the breeze. This plant could ease a woman's monthly pains. It could calm a fitful sleeper. It was a threat to the architecture of control. They weren't stamping out a fringe cult. They were fighting a paradigm shift that would have made them obsolete. You look at the simple, elegant instructions on the page, and you see the ghost of our own world staring back. The whispers of revolutionary energy sources that could unplug us from the grid, of medical cures that threaten trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industries, of food production systems that could empower the masses and bankrupt the conglomerates. The technology changes, but the story is the same. Power does not surrender its grip willingly. The history they don't want you to know is the one that was never supposed to survive. A history written not in Latin on vellum, but in code, on tools and bridges and scraps of cloth. This is the medieval world's first open-source resistance. You realize with a jolt that this is no different from the underground networks of our own time. The hacktivists and encrypted messengers who spread truth under the boot of authoritarian control. The serpent is wisdom, ancient and earthly. The gear is innovation, the turning of a new world. Together, they are a promise and a threat. The document in the lead-lined box was never meant to be a prayer. It wasn't a chronicle of kings, nor a tally of tithes paid to a corrupt bishop. The secret the church wanted to burn, the truth they buried under a ton of stone and 800 years of silence, was a map of the heavens. You are there now, in the cold, sterile air of the conservation lab, a place that feels as much like a morgue as a library. Push your fingers into the damp, cold soil. It's not just dirt, it's a grave, a chronicle. Underneath the sleeping grass, the ground is seeded with secrets. You feel something hard and cold against your fingertip. You pull it free. It's an arrowhead, pitted and rusted, but its triangular bodkin point is still wickedly sharp, designed for one purpose: to punch through chainmail. This wasn't thrown by a farmer in a rage. This was fired by a disciplined archer. The church preached against usury with fire and fury, not out of divine doctrine, but as a calculated act of economic warfare. By declaring it a sin, they could crush their primary financial competitors, Jewish and secular lenders, while secretly running their own predatory lending operations through proxies and loopholes recorded right here in this book. It's the historical blueprint for every modern corporation that uses a veneer of morality to corner a market. The tech company that preaches about connection while profiting from addiction. The bank that advertises community investment while foreclosing on the homes of the poor. The air is thick with a strange perfume. The gentle, apple-like scent of chamomile, the sharp, bitter smell of feverfew, and another, a silvery green plant you don't recognize, with a fragrance like sage and wild magic. This is mugwort. Your fingernails scrape against a small stone, the sound a dry whisper in the quiet afternoon. This garden, and the woman tending it beside you, is a forbidden pharmacy. 99% of people will live and die believing that these women, these quiet herbalists, were trafficking with demons. The truth is so much more dangerous. They were the era's most effective doctors. But what if the land beneath your own hovel could become a paradise? What if your small garden plot could outproduce the Lord's entire demesne? The system doesn't just collapse. It becomes a joke, a cruel, forgotten absurdity. This is what the Serpent Gear Society knew. They weren't just librarians, hoarding dusty scrolls. They were architects of a new world, a world without masters, without serfs, without the manufactured scarcity that keeps humanity on its knees. The ferocity of the church, the relentless persecution by the nobility. It was never about heresy. It was never about a threat to God. You see it again, carved into the underside of the stone bridge your grandfather helped build. Last week, it was just a mason's mark. Now it's a signpost. In the market, you see it subtly woven into the hem of a merchant's cloak, a thread of dark green against brown wool. 99% of people see only a pattern. You now see a password. These aren't just peasants. They are a network, an invisible web of knowledge stretching from the peat bogs of Ireland to the vineyards of Aquitaine. They are the secret society of the Serpent Gear. You hear the splintering of the door and the bellow of the reeve. The light from their torches floods the clearing, painting the trees in dancing, hellish shades of orange. You are frozen for a second, watching the end of a dream. You realize the truth, cold and sharp as a blade in your gut. It was never about the grain. It was never about the technology. It was about keeping you on your knees, in the dark. And now, they've come to burn the light from the world. They tell you it was a riot. That's the official story, the one carved into the acceptable pages of history. But the most dangerous lie isn't a lie at all. It's a carefully chosen name. And the name they gave it, the Peasants' Revolt, was designed to make you think of chaos, of a mindless, panicked rabble with pitchforks and torches. It was designed to make you think it failed. You are standing in a field in Kent, where the wind sounds like a long, slow exhalation of breath. The sky is the color of old pewter. Kneel down. Fail to give the church its 10%, and you would be denied communion. Your children would go unbaptized, and you would be buried in unconsecrated ground. Your soul, they promised, lost to demons forever. The church was the largest landowner in Europe, its power absolute. And here, in this secret ledger, is the proof of how it protected that power. You find notations detailing loans made to struggling farmers at interest rates that would make a modern loan shark blush. But wait, wasn't usury, the lending of money for interest, a mortal sin? This is the secret that changes everything. They burned women for what you're about to learn. What they don't want you to know is that the fires had nothing to do with Satan and everything to do with sovereignty. You are kneeling in the dirt. It's not the neat, orderly earth of a monastery's herb garden with its stone-lined beds and Latin markers. This is a chaotic plot of life behind a peasant's hovel, a place of tangled green stems and wild blossoms that seem to fight for the sun. Not just a bad harvest, but the very concept of a starving winter erased. It would have created a surplus of food so vast that the entire foundation of power would have crumbled into dust. A lord's power isn't in his sword. It's in the acres he controls. It's in the grain he stores in his keep while your children grow thin. The feudal contract is simple. You trade your freedom for a meager security, a promise that the Lord's land will keep you from the brink of death. With the tip of a small, sharp stone, she quickly, almost unconsciously, etches a mark into the wooden handle. It's a serpent, coiled to bite the cog of a gear. You've seen it before, but today, something clicks into place. It's not a doodle, it's a signature. Your heart begins to hammer a frantic, secret rhythm against your ribs. You feel a thrill that tastes like cold iron, the chilling excitement of a detective stumbling upon a conspiracy hiding in plain sight. That evening, as you walk the muddy track back to your hovel, your eyes are newly opened, a strategic extinguishing of the lights. Suddenly, a dog barks in the distance. Then another. Thomas's head snaps up, his eyes wide with terror. Hoofbeats, the muffled thunder of horses riding hard through the forest. They know the Lord's reeve is coming. Thomas grabs a small, intricately carved gear from the machine's core, its teeth interlocking in a pattern you've never seen. He shoves it into your hand. The wood is smooth, almost alive. "Run," he whispers, his voice trembling. "They can burn the mill. Don't let them have the knowledge." Then, as now, the only unforgivable sin is disobedience. Suddenly, a dog barks, sharp and frantic. Not a village dog, you know. It's the sound of a stranger's presence. Ilara's hand tightens on yours, her fingernails digging into your skin. Through a crack in the window shutter, you see the flicker of a torch, a shadow falling across the mud lane where no one should be walking. The sound of the oiled bolt, once a comfort, now feels like the lid of a coffin being nailed shut. They are not here for prayer. They are here to make an example. You can almost hear the chink of the coin, feel the cold weight of it in a mother's hand as she trades her family's security for a slip of paper promising a miracle. 99% of people still see the medieval church as a spiritual guide, a beacon in the darkness. They don't understand the sheer brutal scale of this economic machine. Tithes weren't gentle donations. They were a tax, enforced with the threat of eternal damnation. On its cover is a symbol you've only seen once before, etched on a standing stone in the haunted wood outside the village, a mark for which they burn people. The question is, will we? They lied about the past. What else are they lying about now? You can almost feel it in your hands, a dark, impossibly rich loam, threaded with the black magic of charcoal, crushed bone, and pottery shards. It's a biochar, a self-perpetuating terraforming engine created from kitchen waste and hearth ash. The very things a peasant throws away. You close your eyes, and the musty scent of the room is replaced by the sweet, heavy perfume of this impossible soil. It's the smell of life, of abundance. It is the smell of revolution. This knowledge, in the hands of the common man, would have made famine a distant memory. The symbol was meant to be forgotten. What they don't want you to know is that for centuries, historians dismissed it as a simple folk motif, a charming doodle from an illiterate age. But you've seen the truth, and now you see it everywhere. It starts with the chill of the morning mist clinging to your woolen tunic. You're helping old Elspeth sharpen her sickle, the rhythmic shing 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 of the whetstone a familiar sound against the crow's caw. Her hands, gnarled like ancient roots, are steady. As she finishes, she turns the sickle over. This is the secret they don't want you to know. The term Dark Ages is the most successful propaganda campaign in history. It wasn't a time of ignorance. It was a time of deliberate suppression. Progress that benefits the many but threatens the power of the few has always been the first to be extinguished. It's the same cold logic used by kings who burned books, and it's the same logic you see today when a corporation buries a patent for a clean energy source or a government restricts access to an open internet. The darkness was a choice. They don't care about the village's ways. They answer to a bishop, to a king, to a new centralized power that sees these local customs not as pragmatic, but as rebellious. The church's obsession with your sin, with Alera's hand in yours in the dark, was never about saving your soul. It was about controlling your land, your children, your future. It's a tactic we still see today, a ghost in our own machine, where moral panics about who people love are used as a powerful distraction, a tool for social control. The real sin was never lust. A few lines down, you see where that money went, not to feed the poor, but to acquire a parcel of land with a strategic river crossing, effectively giving the monastery control over all local trade. This wasn't charity. It was a hostile takeover disguised as piety. And then you find them, the indulgences, a literal get-out-of-hell free card sold to the terrified and the desperate. Here is a merchant's wife, paying a silver florin to shorten her dead husband's time in purgatory by 50 years. The dry, whispery crackle of the page turning sounds like bones shifting in a forgotten grave. It's a chilling echo of our own world, where the question is so often not what is most effective, but who owns the patent. The scraping stops. A wave of warmth floods your skull as the pressure that has tormented you for months is suddenly released. The world sharpens. The candlelight no longer explodes in your vision. The The monk leans close, his breath smelling of herbs, not incense. And as he bandages your head, you see it. Tucked into the belt beneath his coarse robe is not a rosary, but a small, leather-bound book. The chokehold on information by a handful of digital lords. The constant manufacturing of fear and scarcity to justify more control. They are building a new dark age, an age of digital feudalism, where access to truth is a privilege you pay for, not a right you are born with. They convinced the medieval peasant the rain failed because of his sins, not because the Lord diverted the river for his own fields. Today, they convince you that systemic failure is your personal fault. The war on knowledge never ended. The Serpent Gear Society lost their fight. They don't know it was a cage built on a single deliberate lie, that the earth is stingy and that man is born to starve. You read the words, and the world outside your small circle of light dissolves. It's not a text of celestial mechanics. It's a recipe, a farmer's almanac written with the precision of a master alchemist. The title is Terra Preta de Indio, the Black Earth of the Ancients. It describes in painstaking detail how to create a living soil, a soil that never tires, that never needs to lie fallow, a soil that feeds itself. The smell of burning wood and singed hair is the smell of manufactured consent. And you're left with the horrifying truth that when a system claims to be divine, it's usually to hide the fact that it is ruthlessly, terrifyingly human. The real question is not whether you are innocent, but what they will do to the next person who questions the rules. Thomas sees you, but his face shows no fear, only a fierce pride. He scoops a handful of grain into the hopper. The machine doesn't groan, it sings. A low, powerful hum vibrates through the soles of your feet as the stones turn with impossible speed, producing a stream of fine white flour more pure than any you have ever seen. This machine could feed 5 villages. It could break the Lord's power. It could end the winter starvations. It is freedom. Carved from wood and powered by water. And that is precisely why it must be destroyed. Whispers of relationships the church had no name for, except abomination. 2 weavers who shared a life, a bed, a devotion that ran deeper than any vow. 2 shepherds who found solace in each other's company on the cold, lonely hills. These things were often tolerated, woven into the fabric of the local village, so long as they didn't threaten the iron triangle of property, marriage, and inheritance. It was a fragile peace, a quiet understanding. But that peace is beginning to crack. Men are arriving from the cities now, men with colder eyes and cleaner robes. The columns are neat, the monk's hand precise, but these are not records of souls saved. They are records of profits extracted. You see an entry for Sir Renaud, a local lord who paid the equivalent of a farmer's entire life earnings. The reason? Absolution for the sin of wrath, which you know is a polite way of saying he murdered a rival in a drunken rage. Why was this knowledge branded as demonic? Because it worked. And it worked outside the church's monopoly on salvation. This monk's knowledge isn't from Rome. It's from texts plundered from the libraries of Cordoba, whispers from pagan healers, pre-Christian wisdom that sees the body not just as a vessel for a soul, but as a machine that can be fixed. The church's official medicine, prayers for the rich, bleeding for the poor, kept you dependent. It ensured that your only hope for survival in this life and the next ran through them. They manufactured moral panics about witches to demonize female knowledge and engineered famines to crush any whisper of resistance. They wrote the Dark Ages into existence to convince every generation that followed that a world without their absolute control was a world of chaos and ignorance. The lie you were taught in school. And here is the final secret, the one that connects their cold grave to your warm screen. This wasn't a historical anomaly. It was a beta test. The same playbook is running right now, in high definition. The demonization of independent thought. The final secret of the Gleba Doctrina wasn't a star chart. It wasn't a formula for turning lead to gold, or a map to a forgotten king's tomb. The greatest secret in history smells of wet earth after a long drought. You lean closer to the translated text, the candlelight casting long, dancing shadows across the cramped chamber. The translator's hands are shaking, not from fear, but from a revelation so profound it feels like blasphemy. For 800 years, this knowledge was buried, hunted, and burned, because 99% of people believe the feudal system was a natural, inevitable order. This is the two-tiered system of justice, the one that has trickled down through the centuries, a dark inheritance we still live with. It's the ancestor of every modern courtroom, where a person of means can afford a legal defense that navigates the labyrinth of the law, while the poor face its full, unforgiving force. The game has always been rigged. You look at your raw, red arm. The crowd gasps. Is it a miracle? Or was the fix in your favor? It doesn't matter. The point has been made. Power has been demonstrated. An intricate lattice of gears, cogs, and levers, all meshing and turning with a hypnotic, silent precision. You are looking at a wooden brain, a clockwork heart designed not to tell time, but to create it, to give back the stolen hours. 99% of people will live and die believing that such technology is the stuff of fantasy, the work of sorcerers. They've been taught that the world is simple, that innovation is sin, that the old ways are the only ways. But what you are looking at is the truth. This isn't an anomaly. It's evidence. 99% of people believe the medieval world was one of rigid, terrified piety. They don't know that the very confession records meant to enforce this morality accidentally became a secret catalog of its defiance. In the hushed privacy of the confessional, priests heard it all. The tales of night walking, the herbs women used to control their own bodies, the arrangements made to ensure a bloodline continued, even if it meant a wife turning a blind eye to her husband's visit to a lonely widow. And something else, a secret even deeper. The book in your hands wasn't written for God. It was written for his accountants. The air in the scriptorium is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 winters, the scent of decaying paper, sweet beeswax, and the damp chill that clings to the stone no matter how high the fire burns. You run a trembling finger over the vellum page. It's not a psalm, it's a balance sheet, recently unsealed. This ledger from an 800-year-old monastery tells a story the church never wanted told. It is a gospel of greed, written in the ink of human fear. There is no scream, only a dry, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape of metal turning against bone, a sound that feels like it's happening inside your own mind, a vibration that travels down your spine. This isn't violence. This is precision. This is a forbidden art. What the church doesn't want you to know is that this procedure, this supposed savagery, is a sophisticated neurological surgery to relieve the very real pressure building against your brain. Analysis of skulls from your time, centuries from now, will show a shocking survival rate, as high as 70%. The bone will show smooth, healed edges. People lived. They were a threat, not because they had armies, but because they had answers. And the elites of their time, the church, the nobility, did what all threatened power structures do. They launched a war on information. You can almost smell it, can't you? The sweet, sick scent of history being murdered. Not the smell of plague pits, but of burning books and silenced tongues, masked by the cloying incense of holy lies. They didn't use words like misinformation. They called it heresy. They didn't deplatform their enemies. They burned them alive. Tonight, you will become a shadow, a thief, a ghost haunting the stone house of the man who is trying to erase you. The only question left is if you can steal back your life before he starves it from your bones. Your fingers scrabble against the iron bottom, the clink, clink, clink of your nails against the metal, audible in the dead silence. You find the stone. You pull your arm free. Meanwhile, miles away in his drafty hall, your lord is also judged. He is accused of murder. But for him, there is no cauldron, no divine test. His justice is a negotiation. A payment of 40 silver shillings, the wergild, the man price. His trial is a political maneuver, settled with land and coin. You follow the sound of rushing water, a roar that sounds like power, like life, and then you see it. Tucked into a narrow gorge, a structure of raw timber thrumming with energy. The water wheel isn't groaning. It's spinning with a ferocious speed, throwing off glittering arcs of spray in the faint starlight. You creep closer, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. Inside, by the light of a single tallow lamp, you see him, Thomas, the heretic, and you see his machine. It's not just a single stone. It's a symphony of wood. He speaks of chastity, of a body as a temple for God. But you look at the villagers around you, at the thin faces and the knowing eyes. They know God is far away, but winter is near. A good match means another pair of hands for the harvest, another body to huddle against for warmth. What they buried, what they don't want you to know, is that medieval sexuality was a landscape of brutal pragmatism that defied official doctrine at every single turn. The priest's Latin screeds were just noise against the powerful, silent machinery of human need. What future did they fight for that was so terrifying to the powerful that every trace of it, every mention, every last iron pendant had to be scoured from the face of the earth? The books were written by their killers, but the earth remembers. And you are holding the one page that they failed to burn. Your head is pounding, a relentless drumbeat of pain that has stolen your sight, your balance, your prayers. The village priest gave you relics to kiss and bled your arm until you fainted. Nothing worked. Now, this man, his face a mask of concentration, places the point of the drill against your skull. You hear the wet rasp of your own breathing. You smell the strange, clean scent of wine he used to wash the skin, a secret learned from a text he keeps hidden beneath the floor stones. He begins to turn the handle. The whispers finally stop. The mystery of the Serpent Gear Society resolves not with a sword, but with a horrifyingly simple truth. They were not a single group. They were an idea so dangerous it had to be erased from time itself. That knowledge belongs to everyone. That power can be held in the hands of the many, not the few. That you are capable of more than the system you were born into. Their gleba doctrina was the internet of its day. The serpent symbol, an encrypted signature on a promise of a better world. You look at your daughter's face, pale in the moonlight, slanting through a crack in the roof. Her breath is a fragile thread. The fear is a cold, metallic taste in your mouth. But beneath it, something else is smoldering. A rage that feels warmer than any fire. They have left you with nothing, and when you have nothing left to lose. The scraping from the bowl stops. The silence in the hovel is total. Tonight, you will not be a farmer. You will not be a victim. Or was it a hidden salve of egg white and mallow, a secret preparation that could protect the skin for a few crucial seconds? Was the water even at a true boil, or just hot enough to produce a terrifying cloud of steam? The ordeal isn't about divine judgment. It is a public demonstration of the church's power as the intermediary. They decide who God favors today. As your fingertips break the surface, a searing pain shoots up your arm. You bite back a scream. The metallic taste of fear flooding your mouth. They say his mill can do in an hour what the Lord's mill does in a day. That night, you can't sleep. The hunger in your children's bellies is a physical pain in your own. The steward's smirk is burned into your mind. So you rise. You move through the darkness of your own wattle and daub hut, a ghost in your own life, and slip out into the moonless night. The forest is a place of demons and lost souls, but your fear of starvation is greater than your fear of hell. You are here to talk, to test, to see if your two families' meager fields could be joined, if your lives could be woven together without fraying. You are here to see if a life of back-breaking labor might be bearable with her by your side. This is courtship in a world with no parlors, no promenades, only the stolen darkness between curfew and cockscrow. You remember the priest's face, red and swollen in the Sunday candlelight. His voice booming about the fires of hell reserved for fornicators. How many children had to starve to make their parents forget the dream of freedom? The pendant feels heavier now. It's not just iron. It's the weight of a history that was deliberately murdered and buried. A serpent, often a symbol of secret knowledge or nature, biting a gear, the very symbol of man-made order, of the mill, of the system that ground them down. Was this their flag? A promise to break the machine. What forbidden knowledge did they share? The metallic taste of fear is the only thing you can swallow. It coats your tongue as rough, calloused hands press your shoulders into the splintered wood of the table. You are in a stone room, not a church, but a monk approaches. In his hand is not a cross, but a drill, its metal tip gleaming in the greasy candlelight. This is trepanation, and everything you've been taught tells you this is butchery, a barbaric ritual to let demons out. But 99% of people who believe that are wrong. The truth is what they buried. The abbot's footsteps echo from the far end of the corridor, heavy and deliberate. You clutch the forbidden book to your chest, its secrets a lead weight in your gut. They didn't just salt the earth of history. They are now coming to salt the earth over you. It's a signature on a document. It's a key turning in a lock. It is greed. A thought, poisonous and beautiful, takes root in the barren soil of your mind. You've seen the guards on the granary walls. You know their rotations. You've heard the whispers from other men, men whose faces are becoming tight masks of desperation. The risk is absolute. To be caught is to be hanged from the castle walls, a feast for the crows. But to do nothing is also a death sentence, just a slower, quieter one. But what 99% of people throughout history will never know is that this is not a test of faith. It is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Your hand trembles as you extend it over the cauldron. The heat is a living thing. And here is the secret that could get a man burned for heresy. The priest controls the outcome. You saw him anoint your arm last night. A blessing, he called it. Was it holy water? An entire day stolen from your fields, from your children, for a service that should take an hour. This is the rhythm of your world. A life sentence of inefficiency, paid for in sweat and hunger. But you carry a secret, a dangerous whisper you heard at the market, a rumor of a new mill, built in secret, deep in the woods where the river runs fast and narrow. They say it's the work of a madman, a heretic named Thomas, who believes man can harness God's power without a priest's permission. You can feel the vibration of a whispered word through the very structure of the house. It's not a prayer, it's an arrangement. A girl's hand, calloused from the fields, finds yours in the dark. Her name is Alara. Her father has agreed to this. Her mother pretends not to know. This is night walking, a dance as old as the village itself, and the church calls it mortal sin. But the village calls it survival. It's the same tactic you see in the modern world, when a powerful state unleashes shock and awe, not just to defeat an enemy, but to demoralize an entire population into submission. It's the same reason they label any organized opposition terrorists, to deny their legitimacy, to strip them of their cause and paint them as monsters. The true horror wasn't the violence. It was the boardrooms of power that must have existed, the cold, detached planning of men in castles deciding exactly how much pain was needed to break the human spirit. They taught you to fear the filth in the streets, when the real poison was the lie they were whispering in your ear. A convenient accusation of heresy somewhere else. A slow, systematic, and deliberate war on what it means to be human, to learn, to build, to question. They have almost won. You close the chronicle, the new, false history sealed within it. But as you slide it back onto the shelf, your fingers brush against another book, hidden deep in the shadows. It is not bound in leather, but in dark, oiled wood, a single, gear-like serpent carved into its cover. You know what it is. It is the one they missed, the Last Testament. By engineering this suffering, the Lord breaks the spirit of tenants who demanded better rights last season. He drives families like yours from the land their ancestors worked for centuries, land he can then claim for himself, for more profitable sheep. It's a quiet, bloodless conquest, fought with locked doors and hoarded grain. It is the weaponization of winter, and it's a terrifyingly familiar echo of the future, of markets manipulated to starve the poor, of economic sanctions that crush the innocent, of aid convoys deliberately blocked at borders. The hunger is real, but the cause isn't nature. The priest's voice is a low drone, a Latin prayer that feels more like an incantation. He makes the sign of the cross over the water. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. This is it. You have to plunge your bare arm into that roiling chaos and retrieve the smooth gray stone resting at the bottom. If you pull your arm out and the skin is unblistered, untouched, you are innocent, a miracle. If not, you are guilty, a sinner, a liar. You can hear the rhythmic, agonizing scrape, scrape of the massive grinding stone inside, a sound that mimics the slow erosion of your own life. You heave the sack onto the dusty floor. The Lord's steward doesn't even look at you. He simply dips his wooden measure into your grain. Once for the Lord, once for the church, and a third, deeper scoop for himself. What's left is barely enough. It never is. You watch the miller, a man as gray and dusty as the flour. Feed your grain into the machine. You know this will take all day. The church believed confession would purify the soul. They never imagined it would become a perfect record of their failure. The bolt on the cottage door slides shut with a soft, oiled click, a sound you know better than your own name. Outside, the night is a black sackcloth pulled over the village, suffocating the moonlight. Inside, the air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, sweat, and something else, the sharp, electric scent of a secret. You press your back against the rough daub and wattle wall, the cold seeping through your thin wool tunic. This was an army, a coordinated resistance. 99% of people believe the official story, the one written by the lords who won, that the peasantry was a mindless, disorganized beast to be tamed. This single piece of iron screams that they are wrong. Everything reframes. You look at the pit of bones and no longer see victims of a slaughter. You see soldiers in a lost war. The nobility's infamous cruelty, the stories of impaled captives displayed on hillsides, the deliberate salting of fields, the burning of granaries just before winter. It wasn't chaotic brutality. It was cold, calculated strategy. It's the same tactic used today when public spaces are privatized, when park benches are designed to be impossible to sleep on, when undesirable gatherings are dispersed in the name of order. The fear is always the same, a people who can talk to each other. And that sweet, cloying smell of incense used in the great cathedrals, it wasn't just for ceremony. It was a perfume to mask the stench of the sickness they helped create by destroying public health infrastructure. Her crime wasn't consorting with Satan. It was her knowledge of herbal abortifacients, a secret passed down through generations of the serpent gear, a secret that gave women a terrifying power the church could not permit, control over their own bodies. As she burned, the priest spoke of God's light cleansing the darkness. But you saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't piety. It was the cold, clean satisfaction of a competitor eliminating a rival. They were not defeated in a great battle. There was no final stand. They were simply erased. A rewritten passage here, a confiscated diagram there. It's the sound of your wife's fingernail against the inside of an empty wooden bowl, a desperate, unconscious ritual for a ghost of sustenance. That sound is the truest history of this time. Not the king's decrees, not the bishop's sermons, but the dry, rasping sound of wood on wood, a prayer to a God of emptiness. Why? The question haunts you more than the hunger. Why would he watch you starve? This is the secret the powerful never want the powerless to understand. Scarcity is a choice. Famine is a tool. Your shadow flickers against the nave, a trembling giant thrown by the firelight, licking the base of the cauldron. It's a black iron mouth, and its breath is a cloud of steam that clings to your skin, damp and heavy. You can hear the low, wet sizzle of the water. You can hear the collective held breath of the village, their eyes like 100 tiny daggers on your back. Your accuser stands near the altar, a smirk playing on his lips. He has land. You have nothing. This is not a trial. It is a calculation. You've been walking since before dawn, your bare feet numb against the cold, muddy track. This is the third time this month. The third time you will give a portion of your family's meager harvest to a man who did nothing but be born in the right bed, just for the privilege of using his slow, inefficient mill. You arrive. The great water wheel groans, a tired beast turning with a pathetic slowness. The river here is wide and lazy, deliberately chosen, not for its power, but for its control. The books are gone, turned to smoke on the wind. But what about the things buried in the earth that tell the same forbidden story? That's a secret they'll have to kill to keep. You feel the cold of it seep into your own skin as he places it in your palm. The symbol stamped into its surface is chillingly precise. A serpent, its body coiled, biting down on a toothed gear. Suddenly, the air changes. The story shatters. Your fingernails scrape against the rough iron as the realization hits you with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a rabble. This wasn't a disorganized mob of starving farmers with pitchforks and fury. A mob doesn't have an insignia. A rabble doesn't mint its own symbol of unity and carry it into death. So why did they vanish? The church systematically shut them down, branding them as dens of sin and vice. This is the story they fed the world. But 99% of people don't know that the war on public baths was a war on public assembly. Because communal spaces foster community, and community fosters dissent. Suppressed parish records, hidden for centuries, reveal the truth. It was never about morality. It was about control. The real fear was an organized and connected citizenry that could share ideas without a priest listening in. They create a narrative so complete, so pervasive, that it will fool the world for 500 years. It's the ultimate lesson in institutional power, a lesson that echoes in the halls of your own modern world. When the people who write your laws, the people who manage your money, and the people who control your information all have a shared interest in hiding a truth, that truth stands almost no chance. You remember the pyre last month? The witch? They burned wasn't a crone who cursed the crops. She was a midwife. Your wife doesn't look up. Her hands, once strong enough to pull a plow, now tremble as they try to mend a ragged piece of cloth. Your daughter lies on a bed of straw, her stomach swollen, her limbs thin as twigs. You sit beside her, your own hunger a roaring fire. You remember stories your grandfather told, of feasts and harvests, of bread so fresh the steam would warm your face. It feels like a story from another world. The sound begins, a slow, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. The worst part isn't the boiling water. The worst part is the lie they tell you about God's will, a lie that smells of incense and hot iron. They say the innocent flesh will be spared, that God Himself will reach through the steam and cool the liquid just for you. But the shocking truth, the one they bury under stone in Scripture, is that the priest judged you long before the fire was ever lit. The air in the church is thick enough to drink, a foul cocktail of sweat, fear, and damp wool. The machine they found buried in the river mud was impossible. Its gears, carved from waterlogged oak, were crafted with a complexity that history insists shouldn't exist for another 800 years. They call it a lie, an anomaly, but you know the truth. You can feel it in the ache of your shoulders. The sack of grain digs into your spine. Each step, a small agony on the path to the Lord's mill. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and coming rain. Ban the books that ask the most dangerous questions. Bury the histories that prove you weren't always in charge. Look at the fire. The hiss and curl of a vellum page as the ink boils away is the sound of your own future shrinking. Because somewhere, in the dark archives of a monastery or the basement of a museum, physical proof of this lie still exists. Sophisticated tools, medical instruments, and star charts found in the dirt, all labeled as anomalies or unexplained because they don't fit the official story. They prove you weren't primitive. You were silenced. All around you are the jumbled, forgotten bones of a peasant revolt from a time no chronicle even remembers. They are anonymous, a testament to a failed hope. But then the archaeologist beside you points, his breath a white plume in the gray light. He gestures toward a skeletal hand, its bony fingers curled into a permanent, desperate grip. Something is clutched inside. With painstaking care, he brushes away the last of the soil. It's not a cross. It's a small, flat pendant of dark, pitted iron. But instead, your guide points to a network of clay pipes, half unearthed from the packed dirt, a hidden, sophisticated sewer system. Archaeological digs in cities like London have proven this wasn't an anomaly. They've uncovered the foundations of public bathhouses, or stews, that were widespread, popular, and central to life. You can almost feel the heat, the wet hiss of steam rising from the hot stones, the murmur of 100 conversations echoing in a vaulted room. This was where you came, not just to be clean, but to be human. To talk, to trade news, to feel connected. The secrets of alloy making and advanced architecture, once shared freely, are now locked away behind oaths and rituals, their origins erased. Anyone practicing the old ways is a charlatan, a threat to be ruined. And above them all, the church. It needs to be the sole sun in a starless sky, the only keeper of light. It cannot abide the thought that true knowledge, real power, could grow in the soil of a common mind. So, they don't just burn the books of the Serpent Gear Society. They salt the earth of memory itself. But the forbidden knowledge, uncovered 700 years later by scientists analyzing the dust from those very granaries, is this. It was murder. They found pollen, microscopic resilient ghosts of wheat, barley, and oats. Not just a little, but evidence of vast stockpiles. A mountain of grain sealed in the dark. Enough to have fed every hollow-eyed man, woman, and child in your lands for 3 winters. It wasn't gone. It was withheld. You go back to your hovel as the weak, gray light begins to fail. The smell of damp earth and despair clings to the thin walls. The first piece of a puzzle that someone was killed to protect. The real question, the one that keeps you awake, is not just what this key unlocks, but what other terrifying secrets are written on the forbidden pages that follow. Who was truly leading them? You can feel the truth of it in your bones, the same way you can feel the phantom warmth of a limb that's been cut off. Your world feels smaller, colder, and more ignorant than it should. This fire is not an act of faith. It's an act of historical vandalism. It's the same cold logic that, centuries from now, will lead men to press a delete key instead of holding a torch. The principle is identical. The easiest way to control a population is to control its memory. Erase the stories that offer a different way to live. It was the gut-wrenching animal scream of a man watching his son being flayed alive. A sound deliberately designed to echo in the memory of every peasant who heard it. This wasn't battle. This was a form of black warfare. A hidden psychological war waged by the nobility not just to win, but to shatter the very soul of resistance. You are kneeling in the mud, beside a pit that was never meant to be found. The air is cold and heavy with the smell of disturbed earth, a scent of damp roots and final secrets. They paint you a picture of filth and squalor. They want you to imagine the stench of human waste running in the streets, a world cloaked in grime. But what they don't want you to know is that this image was a weapon. You're walking now through the excavated bones of a 12th century town. The air is still, but if you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The ghost chatter of merchants, the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. You expect to be overwhelmed by the imagined smell of rot, the phantom scent of plague. Out in the muddy fields, the baron needs his serfs to be brutish, to believe they are incapable of thought beyond the harvest. He needs them to see themselves as little more than beasts of burden, so they will never question why he lives in a stone keep, while their children shiver in wattle and daub huts. So the stories of their clever ancestors, the members of the serpent gear who built self-winding clocks and irrigation systems, are twisted into fables of demonic pacts. In the city, the guildmaster needs a monopoly on his craft. They told you it was for your protection, a shield against the wolves and the bandits. But the wolf isn't in the woods anymore. The wolf is in that castle, sleeping on silk, behind walls 50 feet high. And inside those walls, inside the long, dark granaries, is a truth that would burn the world down. 99% of people, from your village to the next kingdom, will live and die believing the Great Famine was a tragedy of blighted crops and divine punishment. Or the Serpent of Eden, the purveyor of a truth that costs you paradise. And the gear, a symbol of the machine, of the universe as a mechanism, not a divine mystery. An idea so heretical, it could topple an empire built on faith. Who were they? A guild of heretical thinkers? A secret tradition, stretching back to the burned libraries of the classical world? You stare at the vellum, at the impossible knowledge it holds. The metallic taste of fear, old and borrowed, coats your tongue. This star chart is a key, but it's only the first page. But this banner in your hands, dripping ancient river water onto your boots, it whispers a different truth from the grave. It tells you that they knew exactly what they were doing. They had a network, a symbol, a philosophy. They had a war plan. And the most terrifying part, the secret that keeps kings and presidents awake at night, isn't that they failed. It's how close they came to succeeding. The records say their charismatic leader was executed in London. But the symbol kept spreading for another 50 years. A silent promise, passed in the dark. Agricultural tables from a fallen empire that knew how to rotate crops to triple a harvest. A secret that could end the famines that haunt every winter. Each burning page is a brick in the wall of a prison you don't even know you're in. This is the great secret of your age. The Dark Ages weren't a slow, natural decline. They were a demolition. A carefully managed blackout. An orchestrated campaign to sever the present from a past that was brighter, cleverer, and more free than they want you to imagine. Forget the shining armor. The image is a lie, a fairy tale painted over a mass grave. What they don't want you to know is that 97% of what we're told about chivalry was invented centuries later, a coat of gold paint slapped over a blood-rusted machine of enforcement. The true weapon of the medieval battlefield wasn't the longsword. It was terror, meticulously engineered. It was the coppery tang of fear in the air, thick as fog. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. She is no longer a healer, she is a witch. Her knowledge is not wisdom, it is heresy. You dip your quill, you listen to the dry, whispery scrape of the nib against the vellum, a sound like a blade sharpening in the dark. Each stroke is a tiny murder of the truth. This is how it works. 1,000 cuts. What 99% of people will never understand is that the Dark Ages were not a period of history. They were a crime scene, scrubbed clean by the culprits themselves. Your stomach is a hollow cavern, an ache so profound it has become a part of you, like a second heartbeat that only drums out one word: more. The air is silent, too silent. The birds have long since fled or been eaten. But if you listen, truly listen, you can hear it. The ghost of a sound, the faint, high whimper of a child too weak to cry. Your child. You look up from the dead land, and your eyes fix on the castle. It rises from the landscape like a stone tooth, invulnerable, eternal. It's a modern whistleblower, smuggling out data that reveals the official government narrative is a lie. These people were living with a truth far more advanced, far more dangerous than the world around them was prepared to handle. And like all who hold forbidden knowledge, they had to encode it. At the bottom of the star chart, serving as a signature or a seal, is a symbol that belongs to no known guild, no noble house, no religious order. It is a serpent, its body coiled around a single, perfectly rendered gear. The serpent of wisdom. It's the same reason that modern protests are so often framed as chaotic, leaderless, and destructive by the media. To admit that a popular uprising can be intelligent, strategic, and legitimate is to admit that the system is vulnerable. It's to admit that oppression is not a law of nature, but a fragile construct that can be dismantled. They want you to believe that resistance is futile, that the house always wins. They want you to see that peasant with a pitchfork, not the soldier with a plan. What they don't want you to know is that this isn't about heresy, it's about control. 99% of people will live and die in this valley, believing the world is exactly as the church describes it: small, sinful, and knowable only through them. But that book, and the ones burning with it, contained other worlds, a scroll from Greece whispering of a thing called democracy, a herbalist's almanac passed down from a pagan grandmother, detailing how to fight lung fever with a common weed, knowledge that could have saved your sister. They know someone came asking questions. The elites didn't fear peasant swords. They feared peasant minds, because a self-sufficient populace is an uncontrollable one. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. This suppression of knowledge is a blueprint for modern control. When institutions decide what is truth and what is misinformation, they are not protecting you. They are controlling you. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. You are in a scriptorium, the air thick with the smell of melting wax, old parchment, and the metallic tang of fear. Your shadow dances on the cold stone, a distorted twin mimicking your every move. Before you is a chronicle, its leather cover worn smooth by honest hands. Your own hands, however, are not honest tonight. They are stained with iron gall ink, and they tremble. The abbot's instructions were clear. The history of the village healer, the woman who used willow bark to soothe fevers and a strange bubbling mold to close wounds, is to be amended. The history books, the ones written by monks with full bellies, will call it an act of God. But what they don't want you to know is that God had nothing to do with it. The secret isn't in the sky, it's in the soil, in the pollen, in the stone granaries of the man who calls himself your Lord. You stand in a field that has forgotten rain. The earth is a jigsaw of cracked gray clay, and the withered stalks of wheat whisper a dry, dead song in the windless air. 99% of people believe that science was dead, that the church held all knowledge, and that the world was flat in the minds of the common folk. This document is a thunderous refutation. It suggests there were peasant astronomers, men and women who worked the fields by day and charted the clockwork of the cosmos by night. They knew the earth was not the center of all things, and they knew that telling anyone would be a death sentence. This is the medieval equivalent of a leaked top-secret file. It was the mark of a secret society, a union of the dispossessed who shared a terrifyingly modern idea that the world was a machine of oppression, a great and terrible gear, and that they, the wise, the patient, the venomous, could break it. They had leaders, men and women who understood the flow of money, the fragility of supply lines, the psychology of fear. They weren't fighting for a few less pennies in taxes. They were fighting to stop the wheel from turning altogether. This is the story they can't allow to be true. The smell is a sin, burning leather, the sweet cloying scent of melting wax seals, and the uniquely tragic smell of parchment turning to black, fluttering ghosts. It smells like 1,000 years of thinking, dying. You watch a heavy, wooden-bound book tumble into the heart of the blaze. For a single perfect moment, the heat forces it open. You see not demonic scrolls, but a page of impossibly neat Arabic script next to a diagram of the human eye, a lens, a beam of light, a science that could have given sight to the blind, turned to ash. The whispers of the witch are not a historical relic. They echo in the quiet defiance of every modern woman who dares to seek knowledge for herself, to trust her own body, to question the narrative she has been given. A church bell begins to toll in the distance, a dull, metallic reminder of the world that watches you, the world that judges. The woman sees the fear in your eyes. She presses another bundle of herbs into your hand, her grip firm, urgent. "Go now," she whispers, her gaze flicking to the tree line at the edge of the field. It's evidence of a deliberate blackout of history, designed to hide what ordinary people were truly capable of. What they don't want you to know is that these forbidden symbols described advanced crop rotation, effective herbal neurotoxins, even a rudimentary germ theory. The official story is one of helpless peasants praying to a church that held all the answers. The forbidden truth is that they were fighting back with a hidden arsenal of knowledge, a heretical text the church ordered burned on sight. The Gleba Doctrina, the doctrine of the soil. The greatest lie ever told wasn't forged in a single fire. It was whispered in 1,000 different rooms, by 1,000 different mouths, until it became the air you breathe, the story you tell your own children. You feel it now, a pressure behind your eyes, the weight of a deception so vast, it has its own gravity, pulling all of history into its dark orbit. It wasn't one conspiracy. It was a symphony of them, playing a single, terrible song. The candle gutters. You see a large map laid out on a flat stone, held down by rocks. Lines are drawn on it, connecting monasteries, castles, and strategic river crossings. You realize with a cold dread that washes through your entire body. They aren't just sharing knowledge, they are weaponizing it. This isn't a library, it's an arsenal. And their ultimate goal isn't just to survive the dark, it's to set it on fire. What they don't want you to know is that this kind of knowledge doesn't just appear. It isn't a fluke, a single moment of savant-like genius in a sea of mud and superstition. This document is proof of a continuous, hidden stream of scientific thought, flowing like an underground river beneath the official history of the Dark Ages. A secret society of observers, passing their findings down from one generation to the next. Entirely outside the corrupt and willfully ignorant institutions of their time. It's a serpent, coiled and biting down on a single, sharp-toothed gear. The serpent and the gear, the symbol of the forbidden rebellion. This wasn't just a tax revolt. This was a coordinated, international movement. Historians have hidden it for centuries, but this same sigil has been found scratched into the walls of a debtor's prison in Ghent, painted on a broken cask in a Parisian cellar. The most dangerous weapon in your world isn't a sword. It's a sentence they can't control. And tonight, they are trying to burn them all. The fire breathes a hot, greedy breath on your face, so close you can see the sweat glisten on the priest's shaved head as he heaves another armful onto the pyre. You stand in the mud-caked town square, shoulder to shoulder with silent, frightened people. The only sound is the hungry crackle of the flames and the priest's low Latin chant, a rhythm for destruction. It is the same battle fought today in different halls of power over different prescriptions. When they tell you something is unnatural, when they label it sinful, you must learn to ask the question they are terrified of. Is this a true moral danger, or does it simply threaten their control over your life? You look down at the sprig of mugwort in your hand. Its power feels like a living thing, a low hum of forbidden knowledge. You watch as archaeologists brush the last grains of dirt from a false floor, revealing a small, lead-lined box. Inside is not gold, but vellum, covered in a script that pulses with secrets, part Latin, part symbols that have no official record. Historians call them peasant scrawl, but you can feel their power. One symbol, a serpent biting a gear, seems to writhe in the torchlight. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This box contains the reason the term Dark Ages was invented. An underground railroad for an idea, waiting for the right moment, the right person to bring it back into the light. The final page isn't an ending, it's an instruction. And as you read the last line, a single directive meant for you, right here, right now. You understand the true nature of your inheritance. The hunt for the Serpent Gear Society never truly ended. And by unearthing their secret, you've just made yourself the prey. They are the ones who teach a rebel leader how to calculate the trajectory of a trebuchet. They are the ones who smuggle the poultice that saves a child when the physician's leeches have failed. They share the secrets of crop mutation that defy the Lord's meager allotments, the whispers of dissent that blossom into revolt. They are the shadow library, the encrypted server of their age. But as you watch them, huddled in the candlelight, their faces etched with a hope that is more dangerous than despair, you understand a deeper, more terrifying truth. The kind of science that got Giordano Bruno burned at the stake. The kind of truth that forced Galileo to his knees. And it's here, on a piece of sheepskin, written by a man who likely died of dysentery, centuries before Copernicus was even born. You can hear the silence in the room thicken. It's the sound of 1,000 history books becoming fiction. The faint, almost imperceptible scrape of the researcher's fingernail against the protective glass covering the manuscript is the only sound in the world. It's an ASMR-quality whisper of disbelief. The water is low, exposing a bank of thick, black, anaerobic mud. Something is caught in the roots of a fallen willow, a dark, hardened length of fabric, preserved for centuries in this oxygen-starved tomb. With a wet, sucking sound, you work it free. It's heavy, waterlogged. As you unroll it, the mud flakes away. The cloth is a deep, faded crimson, the color of dried blood. And in the center is a symbol, stitched with what was once silver thread. It's not a lord's crest. It's not a holy cross. The sound echoes like a tomb being sealed. Your single candle gutters, its flame dancing wildly, and in the flickering light, you realize you are not alone. The shadows in the corners of the room have deepened, and one of them is moving. This wasn't about the devil. It was about who gets to decide. Centuries from now, scientists will scrape the residue from the inside of medieval pottery and find proof of what the priests called witchcraft. They'll discover complex herbal compounds, sophisticated mixtures that acted as powerful painkillers, antiseptics, and even antibiotics. They will prove, with cold, hard data, that these women were not brewing hexes, but compounding medicine. This secret was buried because an empowered populace, especially empowered women, is the greatest threat a patriarchy has ever known. 99% of people believe medieval peasants were ignorant and brutish. A convenient story crafted to keep you docile. But the truth, buried for 800 years, will keep you awake tonight. This isn't a story of mud and misery. It's the story of a war on knowledge they don't want you to know they won. You are standing on a windswept coast, a place forgotten by the chronicles. The air in this newly excavated cottage is thick with the metallic smell of cold, damp earth, and petrified wood.